Hi, I'm Michael Comorn from Comorn Law PLC.
And I'm Josh Colton, also an attorney at Comorn Law PLC.
We're here to talk today about a very exciting moment in what we could say is United States history. Certainly something that's going to impact Michigan on the grand scale. But a few hours ago, President Trump signed into law the Hemp Farming Bill. This is significant in a lot of ways, but mostly because hemp, while defined differently than traditional marijuana or cannabis, is now legal and deemed legal and differentiated from marijuana and how it's going to be treated. The federal definition is one that is now 0.3% of THC, the active ingredient that has psychoactive effect, and that plant that has that level is deemed hemp under the federal definition and removes this plant as defined from the Controlled Substances Act and something that is no longer punished by the Drug Enforcement Agency and is something that is now going to be regulated by the Agricultural Department at state level. This is significant and important because in 1937, the Marijuana Stamp Act was passed outlawing marijuana and hemp, despite the fact that it had been used in the United States since the founding of the country, and our Constitution was made of hemp paper, and there's stories of hemp being farmed in a major commodity that was being sold during the colonial time. So it has been, and it has always been, a commodity, a cash crop in the United States, and for reasons similar to, or exactly for the reasons that marijuana was made illegal in 1937, and then deemed a controlled one, scheduled substance in 1970-71 during the Nixon era, hemp was not differentiated and was along with marijuana. So the significance of today's historic event is that for, I think it was 83 years, this plant has been illegal, and the federal government has just deemed it something different than marijuana, not marijuana, and a crop that can be grown and is considered an agricultural commodity now, and has paved the way for states such as Michigan to begin a farming and manufacturing. So it's exciting for those reasons, and many others. And we're looking forward to Michigan taking the lead on this as we go forward.
And I guess one of the things that a lot of people are going to start to ask, and we want to start to get into an explanation, maybe today a little bit of a brief overview, but ultimately diving into more depth as we continue on and move forward in this newly created and newly being created program, is, what exactly does this mean? I've already received calls from people who've seen this, who've said, can I go outside and start growing hemp plants in my backyard? Well, as with most things government related, this is going to be a little bit of a longer, more complicated process. Now, the good news is that this is nothing like the regulation that's being put on the marijuana industry. In fact, it's being controlled and overseen by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The application fees are a lot less significant. The bar to get in is a lot less stringent and rigorous. So ultimately, it is going to have less of a barrier for entry. The state of Michigan hasn't yet formally put out its actual program in which would have to be in compliance with the federal law. This program will likely set up a process by which you can apply to be a grower of hemp, a processor, a manufacturer, for one of the hundreds or thousands of different uses ultimately that hemp will have. Just to give you a perspective on the economic impact of an event like this, it's estimated that CBD produced from hemp, which is, mind you, one of thousands of potential uses for hemp, is projected to be worth over $22 billion by the year 2022. This would put it already on par with, if not surpassing, the marijuana market in the U.S. So it's extremely exciting stuff. There's so many opportunities. This is an amazing opportunity both for Michigan's agricultural state, which has seen a lot of downturn, due to falling crop prices and tariffs and other issues. For example, corn crops now, I've spoken to farmers who've said I grow my corn and I barely pay my bills, and if everything goes perfectly, I have just enough to make it to the next year. I've spoken with farmers in Colorado who are now growing hemp who will say quite the opposite. In fact, they're making 5, sometimes 10 times as much as they were on these other crops because of this new opportunity. So it's extremely exciting, and I think it's, I 100% agree with Michael in his analysis that this is a huge moment in U.S. history and in Michigan history. There certainly is a lot of history in Michigan of the use of hemp specifically tied to the automotive industry. And hopefully we can continue this progress and work our way back towards our roots and move this thing forward. It's extremely exciting, and we're excited to be working with you and talking with you and hopefully helping provide some guidance moving forward in this process. Comorran Law is extremely excited to be working closely as a member of the Hemp Industries Association, and hopefully soon to be founding the Hemp Industries Association chapter in Michigan, where we will strive to provide a high level of research, educational opportunities, both for the individuals who want to participate and also for the government, as well as multiple opportunities for individuals who might not see how they fit in but are interested in finding people that they can work with, that they can interact with, to become a part of this exciting new industry that's literally being built from nothing right now.
When you look at the major producers of hemp currently, it's China and Canada, who have had the upper hand in terms of the import and setting the price on it. And the significance of this, that it gives some leverage to American farmers who now have a crop that they can grow that's obviously in demand to the extent where it's created a market of import, and those farmers can now be the suppliers of that hemp that is being imported. And I think also significantly, and should not be overlooked, is that it's not that many times that a new opportunity for new industry manufacturing develops, even though it's a plant that's been around for a very long time and has been proven to be effective for all different types of functions of daily needs. The spectrum is long, we can do a separate video on those things. But when it's all said and done, the various types of products to be manufactured, made in Michigan, putting people back to work, it is a real opportunity to have a renaissance of the manufacturing industry and put Michigan and the Flint, Detroit, cities that have been placed on the map of history as leading in an industry. So I think it shouldn't be overlooked that there's all kinds of opportunities. We're excited here at Comorran Law and want to assist you in finding the right space for you if you're interested in hemp.
A prime example of what Michael was speaking about in regards to the issues with tariffs and how that is impacting the economy and how hemp could be the savior of that is an example that I found in a Forbes magazine article in which they said the estimated effect of China's 25% tariff on the U.S. import of soybeans could cut income for a mid-sized Illinois grain farmer by an average of 87% over 4 years. Well, for farmers who are making enough money to get by and maybe have a little bit extra, an 87% cut is devastating. That's lose the farm, lose the house money. And so creating these opportunities and helping people find these new opportunities to create an economic revival, or at least provide some relief to some of this stress that's created in economic situations like these, is an exciting opportunity. And at Comorran Law, we've spent a significant amount of time researching and studying to bring about in-depth knowledge into the licensing processes, into the state and federal actors involved in this program, into the language and what's being drafted still and what's to come in the future. Working with the regulatory agencies, we feel very confident that we can assist you in a multitude of ways and help you do everything from start a business to sell a business to form partnerships and thrive in this new industry. When you look at the current status of the marijuana industry or cannabis, the rest of the plant above that 0.3% You're talking about a bunch of independent states that have had to create their own rules, but still had major issues because the federal government simply hasn't participated, which means no banking, insurance is tricky, interstate transporting is basically 100% no, and that's not going to be the case with this law. This law not only allows for that, but actually implies that it wants people and wants states not to interfere with interstate commerce. This means that doing things like running online businesses, like getting bank accounts set up, like even interacting with other countries involved in the industry becomes a serious possibility that we haven't yet even realized with our marijuana market, both in the medical and the recreational sense.
Unlike the marijuana industry, the federal government has yet to do anything other than deem policies. In other words, they've created some policies, and it's fair to say that those that are engaged in the marijuana industry should expect the federal government to follow those rules, and if they are in turn doing what is deemed to be appropriate, they should have no concerns for the federal government. But it's still just a policy. And maybe soon, and maybe because of this, the federal government will take that next step and speak with legislation that makes cannabis or marijuana or any plant that is more than 0.3% THC the same kind of legal status, moving it out of the Controlled Substances Act, or that in the states regulated as not a Schedule I controlled substance. But we're not there yet. But where we are today, and this is not a knock on cannabis and certainly not a knock on the industry therein, but the point that I'm trying to make is that the federal government has not just taken a couple steps off the starting line, they are running full steam ahead in that they've authorized this plant to be, by the federal government standards, to be grown, processed, manufactured, transported between states, invested in, made money from, tax to be paid for. We're assuming still need some clarity on some of these things, but I'm assuming in light of its definition, it's not illegal, and therefore there's not going to be the same concerns of the selling of marijuana with 280E and double tax penalties and not being able to write off your overhead as you would other types of write-offs. So it's a completely different animal rising out of the cannabis sativa L plant, which has been deemed criminalized, but this is that same plant but with a 3% or less THC. So the contrast there of the marijuana industry, while it is flourishing and it's clearly moving forward in Michigan with at a very fast rate and almost too fast for the government to regulate, but those issues are not what we're talking about. We're talking about hemp now deemed legal by the federal government and allowing the states to regulate it as something that's not a controlled substance or a drug, but as a agricultural crop. And that's a huge distinction from legal purposes. And of course, Michigan, which has always been a hub of industry and manufacturing, is a point in the overall economy that can be a huge source for the supply chain, which is an area that needs to be addressed and focused on, I think, for this industry to get going. But there's a lot of room in this space for people to get involved. Of course, we're hoping for an industry that's going to be able to flourish, not one that's overregulated, that's not as extremely scrutinized, the licensees and people applying, as we've seen with the MMFLA. But in time, these answers will be given, and we're looking forward to it nonetheless. And today is a very historic day, and we're excited here at Comore Law, and the citizens of Michigan, those people that want to be involved in the industry, should be as well.
Please take the time after you've watched this to make some comments, ask some questions. We're going to follow up shortly. Next week, we'll be diving into a more in-depth look at the federal bills and what hemp legislation actually says and how it will affect you.